Cool. Thank you, Sasha. Yes, so this will be a short fireside chat style conversation between myself, Sergey, who you just saw, co-founder of 1inch, and also Kane Warwick, who's Infinex founder. So, Kane, Sergey, can I invite you guys onto the stage? Round of applause. Yeah, there we go. So this conversation is going to be a little bit more philosophical in nature, talking about mantras, ethoses, and why we do what we do. So we can look not just at the products, but what might be coming based on those ethoses and mantras. So, but first I want to start with personal journeys, because both of you have very interesting entrances into the market, entrances into crypto and Web3. So I want to initially ask sort of what drew you into crypto? Was there a come to Jesus moment? Was it a slow burn? And how did you find yourself sort of as a founder in the space? Kane, potentially we can start with you here.
Sergey just gave me one of the little 1-inch coins, and I still have the first one that I ever got from these guys back in, it must have been like 2019 or something. So yeah, I think I have like 4 or 5 of them now in a drawer at home. But in terms of how I got into crypto, I was running a payment startup in 2014, 2015, and we started taking Bitcoin transactions, supporting some of the Bitcoin brokers in Australia. At that time, and sadly still to this day, the banks in Australia were very adversarial towards crypto. And so a lot of these guys were rotating their bank accounts like on a weekly basis to like stay ahead of the banks. They had a bunch of shell companies that were set up. It was crazy, this cat and mouse game they were playing with the banks to let people buy Bitcoin back when it was about $250. And so we stepped in and said, well, we actually can help you because we have this network of 2,000 agents, so you can process transactions through there. And it started off quite slow. I think in like late 2015, we were doing maybe like $1 million a month. And then it kept ramping up. And by the time we got to like the end of 2016, it was doing like $10-20 million a month in volume, which became meaningful revenue for us. And at that time, like I'd done some ICOs, I'd done a few things. I was sort of dabbling and aware of the space, but not building in the space. And then my daughter was born in December of 2016, and so I took a few months off. And in that time, I really went deep into the space, and I was like, I think these smart contracts might actually be pretty useful. And so out of that, decided to build Haven, which became Synthetics.
Okay.
Yeah, my daughter was born in December 2015. So, and I took also some research on in the crypto space, but the first touch point was 2011. When one of my colleagues, when I was working for the product aggregator, who served LG, L'Oreal, and some other bigger companies. One of the colleagues said, like, oh, there's crypto and you can actually mine it on your MacBook. I tried to mine Litecoin on my MacBook, and I think like, so December 2015, so similar to your story, I had enough time when I was staying home with my daughter. I recognized that there was someone who presented a YouTube video how to build a mining rig. And in 2016, I created my own mining rig and tried to mine some cryptocurrencies. And one day, I recognized, okay, I can do something also on YouTube. Started a YouTube channel, call it Crypto Maniac. I was not that creative. And then Anton joined me when I did live stream and explained people they should not invest in crypto scams and Ponzi schemes. And We found on security audits of smart contracts. Smart contracts was something new for me, but not for him. And one day we started to participate in hackathons and building different things. So 1inch was born, one of these hackathons. This kind of short story of our journey. I recognize that I got a specific feeling. Oh, I need to do it now because later I would not get any entry possibilities into the space, because this is now the right time to build something, to try something. It was feeling like this time of .com, you know, in the end of 90s and the beginning of 20s. That's why I was fully focused on that. Of course, I had always my full-time job, and there was no one day where I was unemployed. I think in the last my 20 years career.
Well, it's funny actually, because we spoke a couple of times very early on when you guys after you'd won the ETH New York hackathon, I think a few months later, and I remember we paid Anton a grant in SNX at the time to do some gas golfing for us and like improve the efficiency of our contracts. And he came back and made them like 90% more efficient. And we were like, this guy's insane. And then I think the other funny story that I have from the early 1inch days was there was this Telegram chat, the OG Telegram chat, right? And this guy would get in there and troll the DexAg guys that were another like Dex aggregator, and just like really just like rib them, and they would freak out, and they were always like DMing the moderators being like, Sergey's being mean to me again, like stop him from saying this stuff. Because anyway, so I think you got banned, or you got
I got at the end banned. Yeah, I'm still banned in this chat.
Still banned from the chat today. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a funny story, like when there were some discussions, like of course, it's like a space where like everyone have own mind, kind of want to say something about the product itself. And I try to argue always, like to find out, okay, what they don't really like on us. And I found out they don't like that we are like shipping always, and try to make it much better. But it's okay. And what was also funny that sometimes people start posting on Twitter. When we were fighting in this DeFi chat, posted 2 apes from Simpsons with the knives and our logos for the projects.
I think sorry, I've got one more funny early story. You know, we had spent so much time together and had all these conversations, and these guys decided to raise a round. And so Jordan and I, who's not the other Synthetics co-founder, were like, we want to invest, you know, we talked to you guys. And then I remember you sent us a message and said, hey, I've got some bad news. Binance and I can't remember who, Binance and one of
Pantera.
And Pantera, that's right, fuck Pantera, seriously. So Binance and Pantera had taken the whole round, and we were like, what? And you're like, no, it's okay, because we're raising another round at like 5x valuation. And I was like, guys, this is so bad. Like, what have you done to us? And so instead of doing the smart thing and saying, all right, fine, like we'll back the truck up and you know, because you guys said you can have as much as you want of the second round, right? So I think we put in like a 50K check or a 100K check, and we should have put like $1 million in. So I had some deep regrets about that one.
Yeah, maybe also background story regarding your funding. Actually, first funding came from the community. I don't know if you remember the Gitcoin grants. There was a really funny story. A lot of our friends who are also sitting here gave us like $10, $100, and through Gitcoin grant program, you could get up to 10, 20x of it. And we were like, oh, 5K already, very nice. And then it was almost 10K. And then we got at one transaction $50,000. And to this time, it was 2019. I was living in an office, so sleeping on the airbed, you know, traveling around the globe, participating on the hackathons, and I had to go to the gym for the shower. So then we received like 50K at one transaction, and we're like, wow. We wrote to this guy and asked, like, was it a mistake? And we were hoping not a mistake. Like we were sitting like, And this guy said like, yes, it was a mistake. But guys, you know what? Like I had fat fingers, yeah. So just wanted to send you 5K, but keep it, yeah, and just do something with this. Build 1 inch with this. And what we did with Anton, we just hired Kirill and some other people who just wrote a lot of code and improved the product a lot. So we were able to grow and build this what we have now.
Super interesting stories. Some of those I didn't know, but from my perspective anyway, when I got into the industry, I was kind of enamored by the philosophical side of democratizing finance. I studied like international development, and I went and studied about Nigeria and about how the corruption, profit sharing, the issues there. And then I went to one talk and they explained the use case of crypto. It was a Bitcoin Maxi conference in Scotland. It was an interesting experience, but I wanted to ask you guys that kind of like philosophical element that Web3, that DeFi has. It really comes through in a lot of the projects, the protocols, the companies, and they stand very firmly on those philosophies of their founders. So I wanted to firstly ask, what do you have a specific philosophy that sort of you keep to specifically within DeFi, and how does that influence the company that you founded or that you now run?
You know, I think it's funny, like I was talking to another founder from this cycle, and I was saying how back in the day there was a big debate, we wouldn't touch USDT, right? And they were like, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense. And I was like, yeah, but there's more. We also wouldn't touch USDC. And they were like, what do you mean? And I'm like, it was too centralized. We wouldn't, it was like not worth touching. And they were like, wow, that's pretty wild. And I was like, yeah, we were very like decentralization maxis. And then I said, when DAI allowed USDC to be collateral, we then canceled DAI as well and stopped using DAI. And they were like, okay, you guys were insane. And I think that, we thought of ourselves at the time as like quite pragmatic. We were one of the first projects to have upgradable proxy contracts, where on Reddit we got destroyed for that. There was a lot of FUD around the fact that the contracts were upgradable, etc. But we thought that was the right approach to kind of building and iterating. So it was this very interesting mix of like ideological purity and pragmatism at the time. And there were some things that were like, okay, this is okay for us to compromise on, but this is like really hard line. And when you look back at that now, 5-6 years later, a lot of that stuff it just is not really tenable, I think, is one of the lessons that we've learned. And where we thought we were pragmatic, the world has forced us to be even more pragmatic and sort of respond to the realities on the ground. And, if you were to say today, no, we can't use USDC in our protocol because it's decentralized, like you're just NGOI, so.
Yes, at the beginning, I and Anton, we decided to just build a front-end application, so we had no back-end systems at all. So we used the wallet's Web3 nodes directly. So, but one day we find out that MetaMask found out that we generate a lot of traffic through the Web3 calls from our front end. Even you could download the front end and your desktop, and you could use it without like accessing our domain.
Using their RPCs and stuff, right?
Yeah. So. And then wallet started to block the requests, and the user experience became much worse. And at the end, we came to the new algorithm of Pathfinder, where we didn't split anymore between the dexes. We created complex graph paths from one asset to another with like up to 5 hops and multiple parallel hops. It was not possible to build it on the front end. I tried, and I got customer feedback that their phone became very hot.
I remember this. Yeah.
You need to find a middle way. From our point of view, we found a middle way. I'm still dreaming on something what I call P2P infrastructure for the whole DeFi, where everything is intent-based and we have open market and everyone can fulfill any intent, even generate an AI image or something. It's very complicated. It's music of tomorrow or a day after tomorrow. Right now we have all these smart contracts without admin keys, no proxies, and everyone can build all microservices, backend services on top of these smart contracts and interact with them how they want. So this is the way what we still go, and yeah, you need to find a middle way.
I agree with that. I think like in the early days, DeFi was growing fast from a very small base, but most of the people who were attracted to DeFi were attracted for ideological reasons until probably DeFi summer, and then there was this huge influx of capital, and it shifted a little bit, but we did get to a point where we sort of ran out of those new ideological purists, people, and we needed to figure out a way forward. And so I think that one of the things that has definitely changed in my mind is that like if we build things that are too hard to use and we're not willing to be pragmatic about focusing on usability, user experience, then we won't grow demand enough to be able to, resist the other forces that are coming in, whether it's TradFi or whatever. So I think it's really important that we build demand for pure on-chain protocols and that people really want to use them. If we have tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people using these protocols and getting value from them and getting utility, then the censorship side becomes less of a problem. We were very focused on censorship resistance, in the early days, I think to our detriment in hindsight.
And so we just announced the Coinbase integration. So obviously we're seeing a shift at the moment from those centralized players looking to DeFi and picking whether it's lending, staking, swaps. How do you see that progressing? Do you see sort of a major app coming out where like Coinbase is trying to do, and how does that look in like sort of a year's time, 2 years' time? Will we start seeing the smaller DeFi protocols and projects just becoming technology companies integrated into these centralized players, or is there still a space for the specialized niche projects and protocols?
I think one other mistake that we made, again, somewhat out of necessity, although there's you could run the counterfactual and say we should have just rolled the dice and done it differently, is there was a lot of regulatory arbitrage that was kind of necessitated. Much of it, nonsensical, right? It was obfuscation and smokescreens to stop the people who were, kind of marshaled outside of the DeFi, wall, trying to break in and kill us all. And I think that that certainly over the next few years will shift. The introduction of TradFi and a bunch of other tailwinds that are kind of sweeping through the industry will give us a little bit more room to do things differently when it comes to organizational structures around DeFi. I think that it's still important that the underlying protocols are permissionless and decentralized, but the people building those protocols should be able to run more like startups and not need to be these weird committees and DAOs and things like that. I think that DAOs are a false economy often, and a better structure is something that more mirrors the traditional startup structure, which is people invest in a small team, they put money in, they expect it to go to zero, but if something comes out of it, that's great. And so for the people in that team, they're sort of pot committed to doing that thing. But if you have enough of those teams, if you have hundreds or thousands or millions of those teams, it doesn't matter if 90% of them go to zero, because the 10% that do produce something become very valuable. And so I think that kind of over-optimizing for decentralization around governance versus just get people to build as many things as possible, and when they build something that's successful, then figure out how you're going to transition governance is a better approach.
I fully agree. Yeah, sometimes I see on our forum posts things. It becomes difficult to argue on a lot of topics and to find a solution. And then you need to find a solution. You spend more time in discussing than to build something. Yeah, so I could spend this time to do something better.
And you know, that's not to say like there was so much of what came out of the early synthetics community. You know, we had some incredible people who were part of that community: DGen Spartan, Arthur Zero X, Andrew Kang, although he's on his villain arc now. But we had so much input that came into the community, and I know you guys had something similar that provided a lot of value. I don't know that the governance was what facilitated that. I think it was like the structure of how we engaged with the community. I don't think that governance is needed to get input from the community and allow them to kind of drive the direction of the product. I think you can do that in other ways. But at the time, we sort of felt like if people aren't voting in Discord or voting, you know, in the balancer, you know, voting panel or whatever back in the day, then it's not real, and that, you know, the team could ignore what the community is saying. And I think it's less about, you know, whether the team or the people who are building things are ignoring the community, and more about just making sure there's an open forum.
So sometimes you have the situation that actually people don't really know what they need. Yeah. So, like what was with iPhone. Yeah. Steve Jobs came with iPhone. No one actually was thinking that they need something like this. Yeah. That they can use finger to to tap and control the applications, and every application can have own interface instead of keyboard. Same keyboard for all applications. So sometimes people don't really understand that they need it until someone who is highly creative comes with one of these solutions. So same I see in my team. For our rebranding was done by our team. It was, I wouldn't say it was influenced by me or Anton. They did an interview with me and Anton. They asked questions, and then they went for 2 weeks in one room and came out with this nice, beautiful brand. And I and Anton, we didn't know that we needed it. Yeah.
And I think, sorry. I think like one thing that's interesting about that is, yes, you know, those kind of 0 to 1 innovations, right? It oftentimes takes like a small team or a single person to kind of connect all the dots and then do it. But, you know, even after the iPhone, remember Steve Jobs was like, no one will ever let any software touch my beautiful iPhone. And then like a year later, after a lot of pressure from a lot of people externally, it was like, actually, we should do an app store, right? So, you know, it wasn't like it was perfect in its first iteration. It took, you know, some input from the outside world.
I agree, yeah.
Okay, we're wrapping up here. Covered quite
Sorry.
a lot. No, I mean,
Two questions.
It's been super interesting. That's what you hope as a moderator. I feel like I did my job because I didn't speak that much. So, but finally, for anyone in the crowd, you've both sort of founded successful projects, and you've been through funding rounds. You've been through all of these different things. So, if you could give some advice to someone out there who has an idea, but maybe doesn't know how to get it from the idea stage to sort of product and how to make it fit, how to grow it. What advice would you give to them? And if you could think about yourself right at when you started, what mistakes did you make and how can they avoid them?
So I would say just keep trying. Yeah. So what we did with Anton, we traveled around the globe, did on hackathon something else. We didn't even thought that we can build a business out of it. It was just for fun. But at the end, Anton came with this idea. At the end, we just tried different products, different versions, different services, and one of these just worked out. It's what's actually happening also with these small startups who got funded from VCs. Like 90% fails, but 10%, maybe less, maybe 2. They built something out of it, new innovations, OpenAI, for example. Same here. Yeah, just keep trying. And if you think about this in mathematical terms, so if you're lazy and you don't do anything, then you can just sit on the couch and do anything. But if you do like average thing, then at the end you will get like from 1 times 365, you get a 1, right? But if you continuously give everything what you can give, and you try and you try, you fail, you stand up, you try, you get multiple tens of X's out of it at the end.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I remember when you guys were just launching the DEX aggregator, and there were a lot of people in the space who were like, "Yeah, I don't really know." And then it was crazy because within like a 3-month period, it went from everyone was using Uniswap to all of a sudden, if you were still using the Uniswap front end, you were basically an idiot. And it was like anyone who was actually still using using Uniswap directly, it was like, why are you using 1inch? What are you doing? And so, it's not always obvious that the thing that you've built is as valuable as it is. Sometimes, it takes a bit of grinding to kind of get there, and you need to, particularly in crypto, you need to find ways to break through the noise, and get attention. And I think that's what these guys did, right? You were like always reply guying, you're like, terminally online, you're in all the chats, you're always posting like how much better 1inch was than this thing, whatever.
Always pushing, always.
Always pushing, yeah, always grinding. And eventually it just like, it became inevitable, but at the beginning it was not inevitable. It just took time. So I think you have to have some conviction in what you're doing. And if you do find something that starts to work and you've got conviction, you just grind and get there.
Perfect. That's all we've got time for. Thank you both. Cheers, guys. Okay.